Hi, everyone. Welcome. Excited to have you with us. While we're waiting for folks to trickle in, wanted to give you a quick heads up that you can enter to win a free spot in our business analytics boot camp while we are waiting to get started. You can do that by scanning the QR code on this page, or you can enter that bit.ly link in a browser. And we'll dive in just a bit. And also feel free to take a screenshot of this slide if you want to save it for later. If you don't want to enter that link quite yet, that works great too. Alrighty, I'm all for being prompt. We have a bit of intro stuff to get through before we jump into our panel, so we'll go ahead and dive in there. Welcome to our business analytics recruiting panel. We'll be talking about kind of what employers are looking for. We have quite the group for this session, so excited to have you all with us. If this is your kind of first time here with us at Leland, feel free to use this QR code to sign up for Leland and stay in the loop for more free events like this one. Also get access to exclusive offers and any other resources tied to business analytics. In terms of agenda, pretty straightforward for the hour that we have together. We'll start with some introductions. We'll move into our panel with our business analytics experts, and then we'll wrap up with kind of a final word on all things business analytics recruiting. So, event logistics, some quick things to just go over with you today. If you have questions, feel free to ask those in the chat. Our panelists will be monitoring there, and we can try to triage questions in there. Although we will be having some targeted questions that we've prepared in advance for our panelists to address for you. Please be respectful to other folks on the call. We ask that you stay on mute so that there's no sound distractions. And when you are participating in the chat, we ask that you be respectful there. And please feel free to sign up for Leland if you want access to receive the recording of this call once we're finished. In terms of the Leland team here, my name's Ellie. I run courses and content here at Leland. So if you do end up winning our seat or want to participate in our business analytics bootcamp that I mentioned earlier, you'll see some notifications and some communication from me there. We also have Erica and Amanda on our experience and events teams here that kind of make all of these free events happen. If you have questions or run into any difficulties during the call, feel free to reach out to Amanda and she can help you sort through those. You'll also see her in the chat answering questions. And we'd like to have you meet your incredible panelists. We have Win, Harsh, and Afia with us today, and would love to have them take a couple seconds to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Win, then we'll move over to you, Harsh, and then we'll round off with you, Afia.
Thanks, Ellie. Hi, guys. I'm Win Maddox. I'm currently in Product Biz Ops and Analytics at LinkedIn. I've been doing this for the last several years. I actually started my career as a financial analyst in a group for private equity, but then decided to make the switch into more of the tech analytics space. And so I've been doing that for a while now. In terms of coaching, I've been coaching on and off for the last 3 or 4 years, more recently on Leland, and pretty much try and cover the whole gamut from career development as well as specific business analytics and intelligence recruiting. All the way from resume review to networking strategy to interview prep. So I've been fortunate enough to help a lot of my clients get into companies they'd like to get into, such as Google, Bain, LinkedIn, et cetera. But just happy to be here and hopefully can help folks out today.
Awesome. Thanks, Win. Harsh.
Lynn, great to meet you and great to see LinkedIn represented here. Hey, everyone. I'm Harsh Sandani. I'm a director of analytics at LinkedIn. And I've worked in the space, business analytics, business intelligence for a while across different industries. So currently in a SaaS-focused role, but prior to that, I've worked in industries focused on manufacturing, semiconductor, et cetera. I joined Leland about a year ago, and I've focused on helping my clients get into the space, so make a career transition, as well as grow into bigger, broader roles with more impact. So that's something I've enjoyed, and yeah, cover the whole gamut.
Awesome. Thanks, Harsh. Afia.
Thanks, Ellie. Hi, everyone. Afia here. And well, we can say Microsoft LinkedIn, we have something to go together. So not 2 against 1, we can say 3. Afia, and I'm a director of data science and product teams in Microsoft right now. I joined Microsoft 6 years ago. So mostly there I've been in leadership roles from analytics perspective. I was always in analytics field, but the focus always, there has been more in terms of how to use data for making business decisions or product roadmaps and so on. And in terms of joining Leland, I'm probably the newbie here. So, but very excited to be here. But at the same time, I have been very actively involved within Microsoft in terms of mentoring even product managers in addition to analysts. And also I have been on recruiting panels in Microsoft. So hoping I can just be useful today.
Awesome. Thank you. We're in for a treat. We've got some real experts, people who have lots of experience in the field. So excited to hear your perspectives and insights during this panel. We'd love to also get to know you, our attendees tonight. Would love for you to drop in the chat kind of where you're dialing in from and what's one thing that you're interested in hoping to learn from tonight's event. Would love to have you just drop that in our chat. We'll see who's first. All right, we've got Ghana and maybe only Ghana, depending on how this goes. Awesome. All right. Panama, Toronto, Morocco, Nigeria. I love it. We've got lots of representation across the globe here. Awesome. We have a couple questions about certificates, factors when thinking about an MSBA program. Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you here. We've got quite the group and excited to learn from our panelists and get some of these questions answered. If you're new to Leland, welcome. We're excited to have you here. Wanted to give a quick intro to what Leland is so you can be a little bit more familiar with our platform. We are a one-stop shop to help you break into the most competitive career paths and schools in the world. And we do this through a few different offerings, whether that's one-on-one coaching with an expert in the fields that you're interested in, live cohort-based courses like the Business Analytics Bootcamp that I mentioned earlier in the call, as well as our on-demand content library, Leland Plus, where you can access lots of different resources for various topics, careers, schools. When we're thinking about recruiting for business analytics specifically, this is a competitive process, it's complicated, and having an expert on your team can make all the difference as you're preparing, whether that's helping you for end-to-end through the entire process or getting more targeted help on the application itself, networking, building a great resume, or preparing for your interviews and being kind of case ready when you're thinking about the case interviews for business analytics. So if you're thinking about any of these things, if you're looking for assistance on any of these things, feel free to book a free strategy call with our team to get matched with the perfect coach who can help you reach those goals and target areas that you're worried about and make them key strengths. Alrighty, and with that, I'd love to dive into our panel. To kick things off, our first question is, how did you land your role in this field? And what was your recruitment process like? We'll start with you, Win, on this one.
Yeah, mine was a bit interesting / unique because I was doing a career pivot. So I started in finance and then wanted to kind of go into the business analytics and data analytics space. So it required a mix of really three things: a lot of networking, a lot of applications, and a lot of interview prep. I think when you're trying to make the pivot into business analytics, trying to network with folks who do those jobs is going to be incredibly important for two reasons. One, primarily to understand what business analytics actually is, like what are the jobs, because not all are created equal, right? You could be a data scientist, you can be in biz ops, you can do a whole variety of different things. But second, most importantly, to try and get referrals at companies for open roles, right? So I think that was a large part of my process. On top of that, just doing a lot of the interview prep to try and nail those things, which I'm sure we'll cover down the line. In terms of actual interview process, they were quite similar across the line, but specifically at LinkedIn, it starts with a recruiter screen, about 30 minutes to 45 minutes of the recruiter, just kind of some entry-level questions. And then it typically jumps into a technical screen. And for different companies, this varies, right? So it's either a take-home test, take-home SQL exam. For LinkedIn specifically, it was more kind of case studies or consulting style case studies with analytics as well. And once you pass those, it then kind of proceeds to a round table of interviews with 3 to 4 different people in the team. And some of those are technical, some of those are behavioral, but it tends to be a mix between the two. So they can try to gauge both your ability to solve problems and ability to think through your technical abilities, as well as your ability as a culture fit at the company. So that was typically mine. I think it was around 6 to 7 interviews total before I got the offer, and that was pretty consistent across different companies.
Awesome. Thanks, Win. Harsh or Afia, is there anything else that you would want to add from your experience?
Sure, I can add. I mean, and I will probably just talk about the initial role that I landed in US, because I'm not originally from US, and my journey towards the first role was quite not linear. What I mean is that I had a 5-year gap in my resume due to not having work authorization initially when I moved here, because I was on a different visa. And for me, I guess what I would here highlight is that, as Vin said, a lot of applications that I had to submit, probably more than 100 or 150. But at the same time, what I kept going within those 5 years was up-leveling my skills. Because I'm talking about 2005 to 2010, 2005, probably data science as a field or discipline did not exist in companies. But then, of course, it was there in terms of being, either you are a software engineer or you are a statistician and so on. So all the skills were there, but it was not called that. So, and when I say up-leveling, I made sure that I am learning, I learned R during that time. I started tutoring during that time. And my first experience was with Expedia in 2010. And that was also a contract to full-time role. I mean, luckily got to the full-time position in 2 months. At the same time, I just want to highlight that it's not going to be similar for everybody, and everybody has different way of getting there. So yeah, I'll stop here in terms of the first role.
Awesome, thanks.
And can I add one thing, Ellie?
Oh yeah, by all means.
And +1 to both what Vin and Afia said. One thing I'll add is, in my recruitment process, I found success in being able to tie like extracting insights and storytelling together, right? Someone asked what business analytics is, and in simple words, it's essentially getting meaning out of data and helping the business stakeholders make better decisions, right? So even if you're making a career pivot or if you're a new grad, if you can tie those two things together in your answers, your chances of success will be much higher. And once I adopted that strategy, I was able to land bigger and better roles. So
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks all. Our next question, business analytics roles are highly competitive. How can applicants differentiate themselves and stand out in the process? Harsh, would love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, so maybe I already preempted that with my earlier comment. So one thing is, how can you become a better storyteller using data, right? So if you're leveraging it in your coursework, if you leverage it in your past experience, whatever it might be, just tying it out to, hey, you know what? I did this analysis. It led to XYZ results, and this is what it meant for the business. That matters a lot because a lot of business analytics roles that you see are not truly technical in nature. They sit at the intersection of what is the business and maybe an engineering team or a data science team or something like that. So yeah, that would be my one tip. I'll pass it off to Vin, Afia. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I would add just 2 things. I completely agree with the storytelling piece. Like trying to translate what did this data lead to is incredibly important. A lot of people under-index on that. But the other 2, I think, are hands-on projects and soft skills, right? So hands-on projects specifically for those who are earlier in their career or have less experience or trying to pivot, going online, looking at publicly available data sets, doing freelance work, trying to get something on your resume that just demonstrates, hey, I've used data and I've analyzed a real problem and have generated an insight from it. So that's like a very easy way for folks to get stuff on their resume. And soft skills, I feel like a lot of people do also under-index. To Harsh's point, right? At big organizations, you're constantly working with cross-functional stakeholders and you're communicating to executives what that story is. So being able to double down on what your communication skills are, what your problem-solving skills are, and demonstrate that both in your resume and your interview are going to be very, very valuable, and I think allow you to stand out more so than people just emphasizing their technical skills, which I think is a dime a dozen at this point. So
awesome. Thanks, Win. Afia, was there anything you wanted to add?
I mean, both Harsh and Ben covered this very comprehensively. The only thing I would say that even now, when I work with my analyst and to help them succeed, the key is to ensure that whatever data we have and we are extracting, we are doing analysis, we are tying it to the business. In our case right now, product. We need to bend the product roadmap with those insights. And if we are not doing that, then we are not successful. And as Ben said, I mean, if you are not going out and you meet so many stakeholders, if you're not effective in communicating your insights and how it ties to the business and product, again, these days that is a key to be successful and stand out.
Awesome. I think one of the key themes I'm picking up here is you need to be able to blend a mix of being very data-driven, being very impact-oriented, and then managing to communicate that in a way that's very clear and maybe less technical for folks who may not have the same background or know the data the same way you will as someone who's been analyzing it. Awesome. Thank you. Our next question, what are the most in-demand technical skills and tools in business analytics today that aspiring analysts should focus on mastering? Afia, I would love to hear from you on this one.
Sure, I will categorize it in a few ways. That is, of course, when we talk about analytics, it's a spectrum. Till a decade ago, probably it was you start with the instrumentation or telemetry of the data, and then you have just the, I would say, foundational reporting on it. Then you do a little bit of a more advanced analytics and analysis on it. Then we were doing statistical analysis and probably machine learning till 5 to 7 years ago. Then AI came. So now you need to look at all those categories, and you need to make sure that you have at least you are covering most of those. For example, not everybody is going to be a data tagging person, but you need to understand how that happens, because that impacts your understanding of how you're collecting data. Secondly, you need to have some experience in terms of at least one data visualization tool. And for me, it started with Tableau and Adobe and so on, but now I'm completely different on Scuba and so on. So, but it is, once you have expertise in one, you can just ramp up onto the other one very quickly. That's not a problem. And then I would say SQL is your bread and butter. It's not even considered something advanced. It's your foundational thing. You need to have that for being an analyst, right? Because, and in some cases, you also need to focus on, knowing how to do ETLs and scope and everything, because every job is different. But I would say to have good understanding of SQL is going to help you a lot. Now, in the past 5 years, or I should say 5 to 10 years, definitely having one of the Python or R is important. I chose R because I am, more of a statistician at heart, and that was more beneficial for me and the way I was working and doing the modeling, etc. So that helped me a lot. Now, after that, you can of course go, towards the machine learning and what you want to explore. Depends on, again, if you want to go deeper in your role or if you want to go wider in your role in terms of analytics. Folks who go deeper, of course, they explore more in terms of, the machine learning and AI, but AI, of course, is everywhere these days, but that's what I would start with.
Awesome. Thank you, Afia. Moving right along to our next question. How important is it to have a technical background to break into business analytics? And what can non-technical applicants do to succeed in the recruiting process? Wynn, I'd be curious to hear your perspectives on this. I know you did come from a technical background and you have a finance background, but I'd be curious to hear your perspective of someone who kind of made a pivot into this space.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it obviously helps having a technical background, but I don't think it's a strict requirement. However, I do think there are things you can do to supplement it to try and get yourself over the line and make yourself competitive, right? And I would classify that in 4 things. I think the first is learning online, right? There's a wealth of resources, Udemy, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, plug for LinkedIn, but generally there's a lot of resources online that allow you to upskill with Python, SQL, the base skills that you really need, right? Obviously, it's not going to be the same as having a computer science background or having a prior job, but it does get you on board at that level. Second is building a portfolio. I think all of us were talking earlier about just doing side projects and kind of getting things done. Building a side project on your own with technical skills or analytics is going to be super, super helpful and just getting yourself competitive. Third is, I think I can't stress this one enough, is highlighting transferable skills aside from analytics, right? So I think everyone thinks analytical skills are the most important, and they're very important. But again, going back to that conversation we had earlier around, soft skills like communication, collaboration, et cetera, a lot of people tend to overlook the transferable skills from past roles or clubs at schools that they used to do, that are very transferable, right? And so digging deeper into your experiences to understand what actually is applicable to the role you're trying to apply for, you'll be honestly shocked at how much overlap there is. And then the last is just networking. Like if you do have a poor, lower technical skill set, I think networking is going to be a bit more important for you, just in terms of finding people who are willing to take a shot and give you a referral versus, putting your resume into a stack of, more competitive applicants that have a much more technical ability. So I think those 4 pillars will help you become more competitive. That's kind of the approach that I took when I was pivoting, because I didn't have the SQL background or the Python background when I moved into this job. And so those things did kind of help me bridge that gap. But curious to hear what Harsh and Afia think as well.
Yeah, agree with everything you said, Vin. Maybe one thing that might help folks get over the intimidation, because there are so many tools, right? Just remember that tools are a way to get to the result that you want to communicate, right? So you might even get 80% there starting with Excel. So if you're new to the field, if you don't know the tool, like, you're not that good at SQL, not that good at Python, you can still wrangle the data in Excel, get to sort of a baseline analysis, build that confidence, and then move forward. And that can become part of your story of why you might be a better fit for the role. And the portfolio that Vin mentioned, you can also build some of that in Excel or in citizen developer tools like Power BI, Power Platforms, etc., to be able to have that in your arsenal.
Perfect. Thanks. Alrighty, let's jump to our next question, which is, what are some ways aspiring business analysts can gain relevant experience to build out their resume or get their foot in the door? Afia, do you have any thoughts on this?
I would actually say this is very much, resonating with how Vin answered the previous question. It starts with, if you are already your aspiring business analyst, and some might be more technical, some might be less technical. At the same time, building your portfolio is one of the key things, because you need to show continuous, learning. And that is what stands out in a lot of, recruiting, at least for me. When I am interviewing, any business analyst, of course, I look for the key foundational skills that they need to have, but also at the same time that over the years, what they have done to learn. Because these days, even somebody at our level needs continuous learning to show that we are not behind in terms of what is required to do these things, to do any kind of analysis or to be successful in their job. So build your portfolio. I would say also, if you can, I mean, it's up to everybody. If you can, just go ahead and try to learn something, which is a certificate, which you can put on your LinkedIn and so on. And then, of course, resume referral is one of the things that is standing out again and again in all of our conversations today. I just posted over there in the chat. In this job market, it is becoming even more important. It was probably not the case always, but when I get a referral, I do talk to them. I try to go through all the resumes that I have, but then the referral one, I know somebody is referring somebody, they might be, good. So let's go and have a conversation. And I'm not suggesting that it's easy to just get referrals like that, but if you can, I would highly recommend that.
Awesome. Thank you, Afia. I think one of the other things, I know Wynn talked about this on one of our previous questions, that you can do kind of your own personal projects. You can go find publicly available data. So even if you're not in a formal business analytics role, there are still ways to build your portfolio, to Afia's point, so that you do have substantial and relevant line items on your resume that communicate how you think about data, that you are capable, and that this is something that you know how to do, and you can do it without, like, on your own volition. You don't need someone else telling you to do it. You can do it on your own.
Yeah, and another thing that might be interesting are contract roles. Like, there are short-term contract roles that you can take on, which are very focused on like the kind of assignments you have, and that might be a good way to build it out. Or hackathons. I know some companies have started doing this, opening things up to the public, wherein you can participate, collaborate with others, and learn from them too.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. All right, we're kind of at our halfway point. So for those who missed the beginning of the session while folks were still trickling in, we are giving away a free admission to our business analytics recruiting boot camp that will be starting in May. So still a couple of months out, but if this is something that you'd be interested in joining, feel free to use that link below to enter our giveaway. And one lucky winner will receive that giveaway seat. But also wanted to give an overview of the rest of the boot camp. For those who do not win the giveaway, we do still have an exclusive discount code to join the Business Analytics Bootcamp tonight. And so more details on that later. But in terms of what this course will actually cover, we're going to be covering kind of all parts of the recruiting process, from landing the actual interview, getting a great resume, so you can get your foot in the door, all the way through the interviews themselves. So we'll tackle things like analytical thinking, problem solving in interviews. We'll talk about case and product interviews, as well as behavioral interviews, data visualization, things like that. It'll be a great session. If you're interested in having some more structured help on getting through the recruiting process, this would be a great resource. And while like I mentioned, this normally would be around $2,600 to join, but like I mentioned, we have an exclusive discount for those who have joined today's session. So you can get $750 off that price and get it for $449 for today's. And that discount, like I said, will expire tonight. And my coworker, Andrew, will text you that code and give you a link to the bootcamp if this is something that you'd be interested in checking out. And one last plug for entering to win using that bit.ly code there. Alrighty, back into our panel. Our next question is, how can candidates prepare for and excel in business analytics interviews? Harsh, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think STAR format, remember that, like behavioral interviews are a key component. I think folks tend to over-index on the technical components and not prepare for the behavioral portion, but that is important and plays an equal part in the decision. Second, case studies. I think Vin touched on it earlier. Those are starting to become bigger and bigger part of these interviews because, again, you're at the cusp of technology and business. So make sure you're able to tie out how you would apply an analysis to solve a business problem. If you get those two right and you meet your table stakes technical knowledge, you'll be golden.
Awesome. Thanks, Harsh. Anything else that Win or Afia wanted to add here?
I would just say there's a lot that you shouldn't leave up to chance, essentially. Like there's a lot of preparation you can do ahead of time that I think will eliminate the random probability that you get a question you can't handle, right? So Glassdoor, for example, has a lot of questions that companies have that they often ask that you can use to prepare, writing out answers to behavioral questions and preparing ahead of time. I think specifically with technical interviews, it's more of a proactive preparation style than a reactive one that makes you do really well, right? It takes around 10 to 15 practice interviews for case studies for you to actually hit a groove and be able to actually be flexible and do them very well. So I would just not under index on that amount of preparation that's required for those kinds of case studies and technical interviews, because you don't want to get in there and feel panicked that it's your third or fourth one and you don't really know how to handle them. So, but everything +1 to what Harsh said.
Yeah, start early, practice. And sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Afia.
No. Great advice, Harsh and Ben. I will just add, in terms of, as Ben mentioned, you are not, there's nothing called over prepping when it comes to these interviews. And when I will particularly emphasize on, till I got into Microsoft, which was almost 6 years ago, I remember it having, first of all, whatever I have mentioned in my resume, having some example of that. Because because it's up to the interviewer. They can actually pick up anything from the resume. And I do that to the business, to the analyst that I am hiring, that, okay, you have mentioned this project. And sometimes it actually sounds like a great project. So I want to learn also how they did that. So as Harsh said, that how you are, you actually ended up connecting your analysis and to the overall business problem and the product is very important. And then as Win said that, okay, please prep ahead of time. I would emphasize two things. I don't remember the website right now, but I actually have gone to this, all these big tech companies, they have a lot of SQL questions, for example, that come in, right, in the interviews. Those are actual interview questions and you can go practice over there. I've done that myself. And I would spend a lot of time on those, thinking through that how I think it was Amazon, Facebook, Meta, and then DoorDash, everybody's questions are there. So do that. Also the behavioral questions. I see that a lot of time, in these analyst questions, as Ben also mentioned, a lot of candidates are brilliant, but then when I get to these behavioral questions, they are not ready to manage that well. And to be transparent, these are the ones, these analysts who are going to be working with multiple stakeholders and matrix environment all the time. So they need to have the ability to just kind of like, process that environment. And in that case, please prep for your behavioral questions. Please have an example of, when you did good, when there was an opportunity. And I personally did that. So that's why I'm highlighting that too.
I guess on the vein of behavioral questions themselves, do you have any tips for fielding those kinds of questions? Because they are different from a more technical question. Do you have any advice on being able to communicate your experience, your kind of story in a way that's succinct and still structured? And I'll open that to whoever.
I can kick off. So sticking to a framework, I think helps a lot. I mentioned the STAR framework. That's so commonly used, allows you to stay focused on what matters, right? And you can create an Excel sheet. I think Afia alluded to this, like prepare in advance, have your stories, and put that in each column, right? So you know exactly what bullets to touch on. Second, try to weave in the company values in there. Some companies are very big on this, especially like a company like Amazon, where their leadership principles, you will be tested on whether you're demonstrating that or not. So this is your chance to tell the story. Might as well try to highlight how you not only done the thing that you're supposed to do, but you're aligned to what they value the most. Yeah, those would be the two things.
Awesome. Thanks, Harsh. I know that was a question out of the blue, so appreciate the answer on the fly. Were there any other thoughts on behaviorals? I know, Afia, you shared some thoughts. Anything from you that you would add, Win? Awesome. Alrighty. What are some common mistakes that candidates make during the recruiting process for business analytics roles, and how can they be avoided? Win, any thoughts on this one?
It's a good question. I would probably summarize into like 3 things. First is overemphasizing technical skills. Harsh mentioned this earlier. I think a lot of people rely very heavily on these roles requiring technical skills with SQL, analytics, Excel, Python, but in their resume and specifically in interviews, they fail to do the storytelling aspect that Harsh mentioned. So being able to say, hey, I did X with this data, I uncovered Y, and that led to Z business outcome is incredibly powerful, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing in these jobs is you're required to take data and make something out of it and actually drive a business decision. So emphasizing that as much as possible, I think people sometimes underindex on that. I think second is generic applications. A lot of people just throw resumes at the wall on LinkedIn and other platforms. But I think taking 30 seconds to 45 seconds to actually review each job description, because each business analyst job is different, right? They require different skill sets, they require different focuses. So being able to take 15 to 20 seconds to tailor your resume to make sure the skills are adequately captured there is a very easy mistake that sometimes goes unnoticed because it might not make you as competitive as you could be. And then my last thing, which I think this is the most important thing, is poor communication. I think people tend to neglect preparing their communication skills when they're doing interviews and they're doing case studies. And just trying to have a simple communication framework. I think one that I use typically is I'm going to tell them what I'm going to tell them. So I'm going to tell you X, Y, and Z. I'm going to tell you about X, Y, and Z, and then summarize what you told them, right? So having that easy framework of here's the things I'm going to tell you, let me tell you about it. Okay, here, let me summarize, is going to help you throughout all of your interviews because it will help you be succinct, not go on tangents, and effectively tell your story effectively. So.
Awesome. That last point reminded me of another coach on the Leland platform was telling me about how when you're trying to tell a story, you tell someone what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. Just super clear.
Bit of a mouthful, but yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Win. Harsh, Afia, any other thoughts that you'd want to add on?
I think I did write it. I don't have too much to add on this, but I did comment in the chat too. Just be very clear of your process that you followed, in describing any example. And this ties to what Vin just mentioned in terms of communication. And it doesn't hurt if you actually practice what you're going to tell as a story. We do that a lot of times, even with, during our job, that if we have a presentation and there's a story we have to tell through data, it is okay to do that. So I even recommend that. In my current team, we actually, when we are interviewing for any analyst, we ask them to come in with a project that they have done and present to the hiring team. And in there, what we look for, of course, is one of the key aspects is communication. Yes, you did the data analysis and you came up with your analysis, but how did you communicate to the stakeholders and then at that time to us, and how that made an effective recommendation.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll add one last thing.
Yes, please.
Some candidates tend to use jargon without actually having experience in that area, because it's very easy to consume that off the internet, and don't do that. So like, if you actually know your stuff, go present it out. If you don't, expect that you will be asked detailed dives into whatever you're saying, right? So your answers need to be fully baked out. So if you don't know the full context of it, or if you did not participate in the project in the way that you listed on your resume, I would stay away from that.
Gotcha. I have one maybe follow-up question to that. Totally understand the point on avoiding jargon if it's not something that you have experience in, but do you think it's worthwhile to avoid jargon generally, or do you think there's a time and place for that?
I would tend to stay away from that like completely. I think it's just better form of communication. Plus, you never know who your interviewer is, right? So even for roles that I hire on my team, which is highly technical, I have a lot of business stakeholders evaluating different skill sets, different values, etc. Right? So if you are using jargon, you tend to run the risk of the person not even understanding what you're trying to say.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Thanks, Harsh. All right. How do you work with your clients throughout the business analytics recruiting process? So I'd love to hear from you just kind of what your approach is to working with clients, and maybe a broader question, how can clients use a coach to get the most out of coaching to have the greatest impact during the recruiting process? Afia, I'd love to start with you on this question.
Well, my coaching mostly has been within, I would say, where I was always working. So here it's Microsoft, and I mentor a lot of I would say product managers and analysts on if they wanna on I would say different situations. One was, okay, there was somebody who's in the product management side, but she wanted to move to the analyst side. So that was the one different, I would say, situation that went well. I'll talk about that too. And then there was a brilliant analyst who wanted to go to product management, and how things went. Or during these processes, I guess everything that Harsh and Vin and I talked about, of course, you have to be very clear in your own mind in terms of describing everything that you did. Now, if you are moving from one, for example, discipline to another, you might not have a lot of examples from the previous discipline. In those scenarios, I always ask my clients or my mentees to try to have a project, pick on a project within your current job, which will focus on where you want to be. So you need to be currently kind of like, you are not, somebody's in the analyst role or PM role, but at the same time, if they want to go to analytics, please, within your current role, look for the opportunities that will actually make you learn on the job of those next role. And which is, in my opinion, very effective. You are not really completely leaving, your current role and trying for something else, but at the same time, on the job learning and doing a project of that future role, in my opinion, is important. Yeah.
Gotcha. So it sounds like very helpful to have an idea of where you personally want to go. So you have a goal that you're working towards, and then a coach or a mentor can kind of help you unlock the path to getting there, or provide you with inputs on how to do that most effectively. Does that sound fair?
Yep.
Awesome. Harsh, I would love to hear from you. I saw some nods, so it sounds like some of that resonated, but curious if you have anything to add.
Yeah, absolutely. It did. It resonated a lot. I think a couple of other scenarios where clients have come seeking help is, hey, this area is changing so much. I don't even know where to start. And the first thing that I do with my clients is help them understand what the core pillars within analytics are, right? Like, and then identify where do you want to specialize? Do you want to be a generalist? Or do you want to go target the specific data engineering pillar, visualization pillar, or advanced analytics? From there, helping them craft the right story, both in terms of their resume as well as for interview prep around why they are the best fit for the role that they're applying for. Following that, job searching strategies, networking strategies, interview prep, and then potentially like a negotiation, etc. Right? So that's like the end to end. But helping them find the path, like you summarized, is the best way to describe the journey.
Perfect. Yeah, what I love about this is you can have an idea of where you want to go, and maybe you don't have all the tools to go there, but often a coach will, or they'll know someone who does, and they can help you get connected and develop those tools so that you can go where you want to go. That's great. Thanks, Harsh. Win, any other thoughts that you want to add here about your experience coaching?
No, I think this all, I mean, Harsh and Afia, it completely echoes with me. I mean, while I offer the gamut from like resume review all the way to interview prep, for me, the main important part is understanding my client's needs. Like, where is their problem area? Where is their focus area, right? Because obviously it's their hard-earned money. I want to maximize the value as much as from, what they're spending to get. And so if I can find that problem area and that focus area and give them the tools that they can use to catalyze movement and progress in their career journey, once they're comfortable with those areas, then that's great. Like, right. So we don't need to cover all of it. If someone's unfamiliar with the job search strategy entirely, then we can go from resume review all the way to interview prep. But I think narrowing in on what exactly their problem and focus area is, like Harsh said, whether it's, actual conceptualization of what analytics means and what the areas are that you want to focus on, or if it's actually getting on the ground and doing that interview prep. So I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. I'm curious if you've ever had experiences where like maybe your client does not know what they need. Do you feel like a coach can be helpful in identifying those gaps?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've had a ton of clients who come to me and they say, I don't even know where to get started, right? I'm either a new grad or I'm trying to do a pivot into an industry and I just have no idea what a job search looks like or what this means. And so typically in that scenario, trying to go through a high level session of like all four of those areas, right? Resume review, job search strategy, networking, and you're trying to kind of pick at, do they have a strategy in any of these areas or are all of them kind of underdeveloped? And then you kind of craft a strategy with the clients on, okay, we'll do one session on this, another session on that, trying to cover the entire gamut. But ideally, they do recognize that they have more done than they think, right? They'll be like, oh, I already have a resume that's pretty good, or I already have a job search strategy I've already been applying. So then you can start to narrow in exactly what that person needs, and that's most effective as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Harsh, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something to add?
I have an example of a client actually where this played out really well, where he had romanticized the idea of working in the industry. He already had a master's degree from a top university, and he was like, you know what? I love doing the analysis that I did for my thesis. I want to get into the industry and do analytics. We had a couple of sessions where he didn't know exactly what he wanted. So I probed him. We ended up in conversations, and he realized that he loved the research aspect of things. And I helped him demystify what it meant to be a data analyst in the industry. Where he was like, oh, you know what? That is not something that I would enjoy. And he ultimately landed at Harvard in like a postdoc or PhD research assistant capacity. And he's loving it right now. So he's able to do what he wanted to, and potentially avoided like 2 to 3 years of dissatisfaction in a job that he might have ended up in if he would have not had a coach, right? So one example.
Yeah, a coach can give you the inside scoop. Is this something you actually want to do? Perfect. Alrighty. We are just here at our final question. I think we've heard so many great insights on what it means to work in business analytics, how to get there, and tools for developing your skill set to get here. So super appreciative of our panelists and all the insights that they've shared so far. This last question is kind of the cherry on top, I'd say, the ribbon that ties it all together. What's your final advice for our audience members who are pursuing a career in business analytics? Is there anything that maybe we haven't touched on yet that you'd love to share with our attendees today? And Afia, I'd love to start with you.
What is your final advice for audience members pushing a career in business analytics? Well, it depends, in my opinion, where you are in your journey. Now, if you are, we talked a lot right today in terms of getting into the analytics discipline. And if somebody wants to change the discipline, what to do in the interview process. Now, while right now I'm at where, if you want to excel in terms of your analytics role as a leader, then that's a different advice that I would give. But if you want you're a mid manager, which is just analytics manager, it would be different advice. If you're just getting in, it will be different. For folks that is just getting in, of course, as everybody mentioned, Ben and Hirsch, please make sure that you have your foundational technical skills there. Of course, there are scenarios where you're just getting from a very non-technical role to technical, then you can build that portfolio and that would not be immediate. Then the second is, again, just revising or, just summarizing what we said. Please be prepared for your interviews. Please go online. There's so many resources. I remember when I was applying for these analyst role, all the resources were not online and there were a lot of books involved. But now there is so much, you can learn from being online and play those scenarios. The third is Ben and Hirsch both mentioned the case studies. What are those case studies? Some of your employers are using those case studies as a presentation. Some are giving you take home, just some case studies. Some are actually just asking those case studies within your interview. So it's more about when Hirsch said STAR method. STAR is kind of like the same thing, asked in a different way. All you need to do is be very clear with your examples when you're describing any process. And I was not able to comment on previous something Hirsch said, but I cannot emphasize more on if you are not clear about something, an analysis or some, or in terms of, I would say, an impact you made and you are describing that on your resume, either you should learn more about it and be very clear on your head what you have to say. If not, please do not write it there because it actually does not go well in the interviews. And this does decrease your chances of being even, when the interview thinks that, okay, this was written just like that, they're not able to believe you going forward in a lot of the answers you are giving. So I would recommend be very sure about what you're writing on your resume. And networking, yes, absolutely. I would say on all of the questions you asked me, it was like that helps everywhere, each stage of that.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks, Afia. I think the one thing that's sticking out to me here is just like, this is an intense process. There's lots to do and lots to prepare for. But the one thing that stood out to me is there's plenty of resources so that you can be prepared for that. And being mindful of those and seeking those resources out can be a huge help. Alrighty, Win, would love to hear from you next.
Yeah, just like two pieces of advice. I'm going to cheat. The first piece of advice would be just nail your story, right? When you go into an interview and someone says, tell me about yourself, just like craft your story ahead of time. Like, don't just list off your resume. Try and understand exactly like why you're here, why you're interviewing for this role, like what it's going to do for you in the future. I think that will help you with a lot of your other behavioral questions to tie in together, like why you're actually interviewing for the role and what it means for you. My second piece is not all business analytics and data analyst roles are the same. And so I think me, Harsh, Afia, we all do similar things, but we also do very different things, right? And so I think one of the bigger things I've learned when I switched into this industry is I spent a lot of time doing just networking, not to get referrals, but just informational interviews. Like, what do you do? What is your day-to-day like? Like, what do you like about your job? What do you not like about your job? And I think doing that really eliminates the risk that you get into a role that you want to leave after 6 months to a year. And so I would say take some time and just think about what roles are exactly resonating for you. Is it coding in SQL all day? Is it trying to build machine learning models as a data scientist? Is it, trying to do more corporate strategy driven by analytics? Like, think about that because it's a very wide dynamic industry and space. So just think about that as you kind of pursue this job strategy. So.
Absolutely. Got to do a little bit of that old-fashioned soul searching and know what you're after. Great. Thanks, Win. And Harsh, would love to wrap this question up with you.
Yeah. I'll piggyback off of what Win mentioned at the very end. Right. Business analytics comes in all flavors, shapes, and sizes, right? So it's a very broad field, but it does take a very special kind of interest and skill set to succeed in roles like that. You need an investigator sort of mindset wherein, you'll get a bunch of data And essentially what you're trying to figure out is, hey, is there a message in here? Does this tell me a story? And I keep hitting on story again and again, but does this tell me something that is important for me to go tell the business, which might impact, our top line, profitability, or any decision that they're going to make, right? If that is not a process that you don't enjoy, maybe reconsider whether business analytics is the route you want to take. But if that is something you enjoy, don't get intimidated by the technical details, the job descriptions, what you hear from people. Just figure out what path is right for you within that realm. Because if you're good at that, you will succeed in a role. You will find your flavor. So.
Absolutely. I love that. If it's what you want to do, you can find a way to do it. But it should be the thing that you want to do. That's great. Thank you, Harsh. Alrighty, we're nearly wrapping up this full thing, but before we do, I am so excited to announce our giveaway winner. Our giveaway winner is, drum roll, Haritha Ashok. Congrats! Super excited to see you in our boot camp in May. We'll see you in a couple of months and expect to get a message from me. We'll go ahead and message you so you know how to get set up for that. Or if you're feeling impatient, you can also send me an email and we can get you set up that way. But super excited. And just one last reminder, if you did not win the giveaway, you still have that opportunity to redeem the exclusive discount of $750 off our original price to get the boot camp for $449 tonight only. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to our client or customer success team and we can help you get set up there. And with that, thank you so much. Let's give a huge round of applause to our panelists, Win, Harsh, and Afia, for sharing their insights, being so generous with their time and their perspectives. Super appreciative of them. If you're interested in working with any of our panelists, you can go ahead and scan those QR codes. It'll take you to their coach profile and you can set up time to chat with them about your goals, where you're trying to go, or any other questions you have about business analytics. And with that, thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone.
So.